It's that word we're all sick of hearing, lockdown.
You must stay at home.
No socialising, no adventures, and fishing under multiple restrictions. But rather than moan about it, we're bringing you this series to keep you going through these troublesome times. I'm Blair, and these are the Lockdown Lives. When the first lockdown hit, I undertook daily Instagram live streams, but once they were done, 24 hours later, they were gone forever. I was inundated with messages from people who had missed them, they had questions to ask, and they wanted to hear them again. So whether you've got questions about bait, want to hear me rant about what's right or wrong with fishing, FAQs, fishing in the upper layers, and plenty more, I hope this series will help answer some of your questions and potentially give you a little fishing fix during the most frustrating of times. These are the Lockdown Lives.
Hello everyone, I'm back again. It's number 8 of the Lockdown live stream re-recordings. As I sit here now, outside that door, there's white everywhere, snow all over the ground. It's mad what a little bit of snow can do to lift morale and stuff. It's been a really nice week. I've managed to invest a little bit of time having snowball fights and sledging with the girls and stuff. And like I say, it's just put a smile on our faces. I hope these are doing the same for you. You know, you've managed to watch a few of them and it's give you that little bit of a fishing fix in a time of so much uncertainty and I suppose disappointment and stuff where we can't do the things we normally could do. Let's crack on though, episode number 8. It is a big topic. When I originally recorded these in that first lockdown, I actually did them over 3 different live streams. And today is all about the upper layers, specifically zigs, moving on to floater fishing and finishing off with stalking. So let's kick things off first with zigs. It's an interesting topic. Really, you can catch a carp with a bit of foam or a piece of cork or a pop-up suspended all the way up there off the bottom. I think that's what a lot of people think, you know, they doubt the method and stuff. So before we get into it, who's caught one? You know, not just a carp, because I'm sure you've all caught plenty of carp on boilies and pellets and corn and particles and tiger nuts, but who's caught one on a zig? If you haven't caught one, have you tried? Maybe you didn't catch one. Have you tried multiple times and still not caught one? I think, like a lot of things in life, to truly believe in something, it's all good and well sitting here listening to me chat away about zigs or maybe reading a magazine article or watching a film about zig rig fishing. But I think to truthfully believe in something, you need to believe it yourself. So the first bit of advice I'd give you is if you've heard about zig rig fishing, if you've watched this thing here now that I'm doing, you need to go out and prove it to yourself. And that would involve going somewhere nice and easy. Don't go to your tricky club lake or your difficult syndicate. Go somewhere nice and easy and just try and gain confidence in the method and believe in it. You know, there'll be nothing more powerful than casting out a zig rig, sitting there, and at some point in the session, beep, 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 you get a bite, you pick the rod up, you start playing that fish in, and you're going, this is a zig. Like, I've hooked one on a zig. And you get it in, you go to net it, and you can see that bit of foam or the pop up in the fish's mouth, and it goes over the net cord, and you'll just be like, oh my God, I've caught one on a zig. Then you will truthfully believe in it. Getting into it a little bit more, I think, for me, zig rig fishing falls into 2 main kind of categories. One of those categories is where the fish are up in the upper layers, they're up off the bottom, and they're actually feeding there. Maybe they're feeding there on naturals, maybe they're feeding there because you've deployed some food there. That's one way you can catch a fish on a zig rig because of a feeding situation. The other one would be, equally as important, where you're catching them by luring them into taking a bit of foam or a pop-up. So we'll cover those first 2 areas first. So feeding situations, what could they be? One example would be where you take something like this. This is a sloppy spod mix. It's a great method for getting the fish feeding in the upper layers. It kind of works best on heavily stocked venues where there's a number of carp present and stuff. Utilising things like the dot spod, you can knock up the mix and you can repeatedly cast it out to an area. The mix itself, it contains the spod cloud, a little bit of oil. I've put some white citrus plume juice in this one, and basically lake water. So take a bucket, in the bottom of the bucket, put some of the spod cloud, put some liquid oil flavour, colouring stuff into that, and then literally top it up with lake water. And what you end up with is a very, very sloppy, messy mix. Now, I love a day's fishing like this. It's really active. You've got to cast that spot every sort of 3 to 5 minutes, keep dropping it out there and stuff. And yeah, you end up with this lovely cloud. If I drop a little bit of this cloud into this tank here, you'll see just how much it does colour up the water. And by repeatedly casting it out there, hopefully the sound of this dot spot hitting the surface of the water, that acts as a kind of dinner bell. The fish come and investigate, and they find all this coloured water up there. You'll notice there's no big particles in it. There's no pellets or sweet corn or boilies or anything. I really want to try and hold those fish in the upper layers. What happens is the fish come in, they smell the attraction, they see the attraction, the coloured water and stuff, and what they end up actually finding there is nothing more than your zig hook bait. They're going around, their gills are going, their mouths are going, their senses are all, you know, on edge and stuff, and all they find is your little foam hook bait or your little pop-up or something. So it's a very good method for bringing those fish into the upper layers, getting them there, getting them interested, getting them looking for food, but all they can actually find is your little zig hook bait when they get there. Another example would be, and this applies much more to the warmer months, when the fish are naturally in the upper layers already, they're looking for the sun, they love that sun on their back and stuff, and you use things like the floaters. You can put some dog biscuits, some slicker floaters, things like riser pellet out there, and you can actually get those fish feeding in the upper layers. In that instance, you may choose to fish a zig just underneath it, just underneath the surface of the water, or potentially you could pop that zig right up onto the surface so it lays on the surface of the water a little bit. Again, it's a great method for catching fish when they're already feeding up in the upper layers and stuff. Another example could be potentially natural hatches. On a lot of the venues you fish, in the substrate, in the silt and stuff in the bottom, there'll be loads of bugs and insects there that feature like a two-part cycle to their life. They might be caddises in the bottom, they might be bloodworm, and they will emerge through the water at certain times of the year, and for example, the bloodworm turn into mosquitoes. And yeah, the fish get on that, they start munching it, they know that that food larder isn't going to be there for very long, and they need to monopolise on it. Ways of identifying if a hatch is taking place on the venue you're fishing. Potentially if you walk around on the windward bank, you might find loads of cases where the bugs have emerged out and flown off and stuff. That would immediately identify to me that there's a hatch, you know, happening out in the water. Another good indicator might be there's a lot of waterfowl pecking the surface of the lake. Coots, grebes, moorhens, swans, ducks, swallows and swifts, for example, coming down and eating those bugs as they emerge. If I walk around a venue and I see that happening out there, I'm going to be looking at that situation going, definitely those fish are going to be in the upper layers feeding on that natural hatch. And again, that would be where I want to deploy a zig out in amongst that hatch to try and nick a bite that way. Another example, and it's more sort of seasonal I suppose, is things like tadpoles hatching. The carp absolutely love eating those. They know they only have a number of weeks before those tadpoles will grow all 4 legs, their tails will shrink and they'll become frogs. And those carp get on it, they munch them, you know. And the carp aren't daft. They don't eat the tadpoles when they're really little. They wait till they develop into nice, big, juicy tadpoles, and then they get on and munch them. In that situation, what could possibly be better than presenting a black Zig Rig, for example, in amongst those tadpoles? It could be possible that it's almost impossible to get a bite on anything else unless you use, for example, a little bit of black foam in that particular situation. So there's a few examples where the fish are up in the upper layers, they're feeding either through stuff we've put in or natural things, and it would make a lot of logical sense to fish a zig hook bait in amongst all of those. The other situation I mentioned, the total different category really, would be, I suppose you could call it lure fishing for them. Basically putting a zig out into the water and you're using that zig, you're trying to pump enough flavour out of it, potentially enough attraction through the colours you use. Remember as well, guys, when you put a zig out, it doesn't just sit there dead still like this, it will waft around and move and stuff. All of those things, carp are very curious and they may well investigate it, hopefully putting it in their mouth to try and understand it further, at which point we've got a pinpoint sharp hook and we catch one. I often consider this kind of zig fishing a little bit of an opportunist approach, but also a logical way of fishing? You know, ask yourself this question. If you go fishing for 24 hours, how many hours of that, period are those carp grubbing around in the silt, feeding on the gravel and stuff, and looking for food on the bottom? Is it 24 hours? Is it 12 hours? Is it 8 hours, 4 hours? Is it just a couple of hours in that 24-hour period that they're actually sticking their head in the bottom and snuffling around and feeding and stuff? I don't really know the answer, and it depends on the time of the year, how hungry the fish are, etc. But I'm pretty confident to say that it isn't for 24 hours. They just simply don't feed for 24 hours. Just like you and I, we might have breakfast, we might have lunch, we might have a little snack in the afternoon, have our dinner. We certainly don't sit there and eat for 24 hours a day. It's not humanly possible. And it's no different for the carp, They will have certain periods in their day when they get on the munch, they have a good feed. And then there'll be other quite prolonged periods of time when they maybe just go and chill out somewhere. Maybe they're just traveling around the lake, avoiding angling pressure and stuff, but they're not directly feeding all the time. So in that situation, it kind of makes a lot of sense to try something like zig rig fishing with a lure, just a single zig, to try and nick that opportunist bite. I often liken it to, it's a curiosity thing, If you think about the carp you're fishing for, how long have they lived in their home? Have they lived there for 5 years? Have they lived there for 15 years? Have they lived there for 50 years? And that could be the case with some of the carp that you're angling for. In that instance, their environment, their lake or their river or their canal, that's their home, and they know it very, very well. They'll have certain patrol routes they use, they'll have certain areas where they'll have to spend great amounts of time, and we discussed this all in episode 2, the watercraft location episode. If you can ascertain a patrol route, for example, that a fish is using on a daily basis, for example, on an area of a lake that they like to go and spend time, it would make a lot of logical sense, for example, to try and position a zig rig on a patrol route or get it into an area where those fish are going to go and chill out for the afternoon. And hopefully, as I say, there's enough attraction in there. I've sprayed it with citrus, for example. I've used a particular colour that kind of wafting around there will stem enough interest for them to go over and suck into their mouth. At the end of the day, if they're swimming along and all of a sudden there's a piece of foam or a pop-up or whatever, and it wasn't there yesterday, it wasn't there last year, it's never been there before, but now it is, and actually, it smells really good. But I'm not really sure about it. It could be dangerous. Maybe they'll leave it alone. Maybe they'll come back. Eventually, if they really want to investigate it further and understand, what is that thing that wasn't there yesterday, wasn't there last year, wasn't there before, what is it? Unlike us, we have hands, they don't. They will put it in their mouth to investigate it further. And that's where that pinpoint sharp hook comes into play and hopefully pricks somewhere and we get a bite. To bring it back to everyday life for us, after you've watched this particular episode, if you go back into your living room or out into the garden or into the garage or the kitchen or wherever it is, and you walk into that room and there's a big helium balloon popped up off the floor and a bit of ribbon, what are you going to do? How are you going to react to that helium balloon? Because it isn't your birthday today. All of a sudden, this balloon's just appeared there. Are you going to be very scared of it and run away, screaming and shouting, "Who's put a balloon in my house? What's that balloon doing there?" Are you going to stand there in disbelief, like, "What? What's going on? What is there a balloon just doing there?" And just stand there, looking at it? Or are you going to go over and touch it? And I think for me personally, my first instinct would be to go and touch it. Am I tripping? Is there actually a balloon here? And I'd want to physically touch it. And I think in many instances, you can catch carp on a zig rig by thinking like that, Get something out there, get something into the zone where they are, or get it on a patrol route, pack it full of attraction, and hopefully, just hopefully, they'll pop it into their mouth to investigate it further. So talking specifically about zigs, they fall into 2 categories with regards to how you can set one up. You've got adjustable zig rig fishing, you've got fixed zig rig fishing, and I'm going to run through with you now those two methods. If we take first a fixed zig rig, I've got one set up here. A fixed zig rig utilises more often than not a lead clip. If I bring this down, you can see here I've got a tungsten weed clip attached to which I've put a lead, and then I've got a little tungsten anti-tangle sleeve there, a length of Zig Flow, in this instance it's 10 pound, and at the end I've attached a hook and I've got my hook bait. I'm utilising the Zig screws for the majority of my Zig rig fishing just because they're so user-friendly and easy to use. Basically, they're a screw that's mounted directly onto an aligner. You can tie your hook on whatever pattern you choose to use. I preference the floater claw hooks. They're light in weight and very, very sharp and thin in the wire. And then you can screw on there a piece of foam. I've got a piece here, for example, just screws on there really, really nicely, or you can screw a pop-up on, a bit of cork, whatever you like, really. That is a fixed rig setup. By fixed, I mean I've dictated how long this hook link is. So this one here, for example, is about 3 foot long. You could use one 6 foot long, 8 foot long, 10 foot long, 1 foot long, for example, but it's fixed in length. There's no adjustability of it. The downside of fishing with a fixed Zig rig is it's fixed. I can't chop and change over the course of my session. Yes, I can shorten this down. I can change it to 2 foot by cutting a bit off, change it to 1 foot, but I can't go back the other way. I'd have to retie that zig to make it longer. The other downside is, if you take myself, for example, I do all my fishing with 9 foot scopes. It means really, in theory, I can't really use a zig longer than sort of 7 or 8 foot. It becomes very problematical. Anything longer than that, difficult to cast. Yes, I could coil it up on an unhooking mat or stuff, but then landing the fish is problematical because I can't get the lead clip through the tip eye. So with a fixed Zig rig, you're kind of dictated by the length of rod you use. However, like lots of things in life, it does have its pros, and the pros are that you can discharge the lead on the take. Like I say, I'm using a lead clip here. If this gets caught in weed and stuff, it will discharge nice and easy. And that is a huge benefit to me when Zig rig fishing. More often than not, I'll fish with quite small hooks, light line, maybe 8, 10, maximum 12 pound clear NXT Zig Flow mono. Hook holds aren't fantastic. You tend to sort of lip or scissor hook them. You get the occasional decent hook hold, but in the grand schemes of things, you're not getting inch hook holds back dead center in the bottom of the mouth. And for that reason, if you're using a 3, 4, 5, 6 foot hook link with a 3 or 4 ounce lead, and you're playing that fish in, it's not hooked fantastically, and the lead's boinging on the line and stuff, you do suffer additional hook holds that you wouldn't normally get when you're fishing a standard bottom bait rig, for example. So from time to time, in certain situations, heavy weed, bigger carp, it is nice to be able to discharge that lead on the take. So that's a fixed Zig rig setup. I think more often than not, if I can get away with it, that would be my choice to fish that way, purely because in certain situations, I do have the ability to discharge the lead if needs be. The other option would be an adjustable Zig rig setup. And again, it has its plus points, but it also has its negative points. So here is an adjustable Zig rig setup. The big difference with this one is, yes, I still utilise a lead, but it's also got a float. So the lead in this instance, there's no lead clip, it is running. I've got a big ring there that's just mounted directly onto the main line. A big heavy lead, which you need to be able to anchor it on the bottom and take the buoyancy of this float. I've then got a large anti-tangle sleeve here, and again, a length of clear NXT Zig Flow mono, and my Zig rig attached at the end. I like to keep these quite short, 2 to 3 foot in length. That massively minimises tangles. By fishing with this large XL anti-tangle sleeve, again, tangles are absolutely minimised. The plus side of fishing with an adjustable Zig rig is I can infinitely adjust the depth. You know, I can fish in very deep water. It can be 30 foot deep, for example, and I can pop an adjustable Zig float up and fish it 1 foot underneath the surface. When I'm playing the fish in, obviously the float will pull down to the lead, and yeah, it's very, very easy to land them. I say very, very easy to land them. The downside is I can't discharge that lead off the main line. So again, going back to the fact that I might have quite a light hook in with a light hook link, maybe a big carp attached. Yeah, by not being able to discharge that lead, potentially it could get snagged in weed and stuff, or more often than not, you get them in and stuff, they're shaking the red, they're scrapping under the rod tip, and you've got a big float and a heavy lead boinging on the line, and sometimes you do suffer hook balls. I've got a tank set up here to try and show you how the concept works. What I would do is I would have an area, maybe I'm spod cloud fishing, maybe I'm just lure fishing for them, but I would deploy that adjustable zig out into the zone. Feel it down like normal, pop it down onto the bite alarm and stuff, and then I would pay line out just by opening the bay alarm until the float comes up and hits the surface. Yeah, the floats that we sell They're great in that they come supplied with an orange band and a black band, so it's nice and easy to see them, you know, even if they're out at range and stuff on the surface, plus this big thing here sticking out of the top. If I'm fishing maybe beyond sort of 30, 40 yards, I'll use binoculars or a monocular just to be able to see everything very, very accurately. So everything's now floating on the surface like so. I would then close the bail arm and loosen the clutch off a little bit, and then I would tighten the clutch up until this starts to disappear like this. So this is now disappeared under the surface. If it's, as I say, 30, 40 yards or further out, I'm then going to use the binoculars to actually look for the Zig hook bait on the surface, and I'm going to keep tightening that drag up on my reel, pulling this down more and more and more and more and more until I just see this disappear underneath the surface of the water. Once that's disappeared underneath the surface, I know that that Zig hook bait is positioned 1-2 inches underneath the surface. I'll then take, it's so difficult in here, guys. I'll then take the rod, imagine this is mounted on the bail arm. I'll come up the blank from where the bail arm is, a foot in length, and then I'll pinch hold of the line here, still with my clutch loose, and then I'll go 1, 2, 3, and I can tighten that clutch up, counting the feet each time, and I can dictate how far underneath the surface I position that little Zig hook bait. Do I want it 1 foot under, 2 foot under, 3 foot under? So it's a very good tactic for accurately positioning your Zig hook bait exactly where you want underneath the surface. Another plus of it is I might decide to leave that out there for half an hour or an hour and then think, yeah, I'm going to go a little bit deeper now. I want to move it 4 foot underneath the surface so I can just pull that float further down. Potentially, it might get warmer. I might start seeing fish a little bit closer to the surface and decide, actually, I want to lift that Zig hook bait up further. Again, I can just pull line off my clutch and pop that Zig hook bait even further up. I've also got the benefit, and I touched on this with you earlier, it's about creating curiosity and stuff and stemming an interest. With an adjustable Zig rig, if I pull this down now, you can see the Zig hook bait just here. I can actually sit next to my reels and just twang the line like this and make that Zig hook bait go up and down. Maybe I decide to let a whole foot out, hold it there for a second, slowly pull it back down again. And you can actually work that Zig hook bait in the water to try and create some interest and activity. So it does have its plus sides in that you can set it at whatever depth you wish. The downside for me though is you can't discharge the lead. So in very weedy, snaggy sort of situations or fishing for big carp, it's not really my ideal choice for Zig rig fishing. When to go Zig rig fishing? You know, by listening to this, it may appear that it's the ultimate answer. For me, I would always opt to try and get a feeding situation down on the bottom, you know. I can use big, strong 25-pound armor link hook links, heavy leads, big, sharper hooks and stuff. You land a lot more fish fishing in that way as opposed to Zig rig fishing. But, as I said, if you just consider how many hours a day they're feeding, it pays dividends to try and master this method and use it as a string to your bow. You can use them right through the year. They're not just a sort of spring-summer tactic, although spring is a great time. The fish are coming in the upper layers for the first time after their winter slumber. They're looking for that sun. They're a little bit muggy, being honest with you, and they're more likely to suck in a bit of yellow foam or a pink pop-up just suspended off the bottom at that time of the year. In the summer months, fantastic method, as I discussed, feeding floaters, riser pellets and stuff, and getting the fish feeding up there. Going into the autumn time, it's when we get a lot of the big hatches taking place, so there'll be a lot of natural hatches. The carp will be monopolising it on then, get the zigs out in amongst those hatches. And the winter months, again, shouldn't be disregarded, whether that be just little short zigs coming up off the bottom, or potentially you're fishing a deep lake where the bottom is very, very cold, the top is freezing cold, and somewhere in the middle of that lake, there'll be an area that might just be half a degree or a degree warmer. The fish will just congregate there and they'll try and see out that sort of hibernation period, just very, very torpid, sitting up off the bottom. If you could ascertain that in the winter months and you can get a nice zig out there pumping out some citrus attraction, you really can have some phenomenal winter fishing. Nighttime too, a lot of people will think, well, how am I possibly going to get one at nighttime? They can be deadly at night. I've had some mega fish to just under 40 pounds on zigs in the hours of complete darkness and stuff. Really, it's a tactic that shouldn't be ignored at all. The best time will always be, you know, and it's the same for any method or any bait, if you can get onto a water that the fish haven't already been caught on zigs, you will have it off, I promise you. Carp become accustomed to scrutinising everything, checking spots, you know, especially pressured fish on busy syndicates and day ticket lakes. If they've got a clear area that they've been hooked and caught on before, they will be petrified of feeding there. They will scrutinise everything, looking for our rigs and stuff, and they will feed with great caution. But if they're just swimming along and they bump into a bit of a hook bait or a ball of maggots or a foam, pop-up or whatever it is up in the upper layers, and they've never been hooked there before, never been caught, and they pop that into their mouth, you're going to catch a lot of fish that way. So if you can get on a venue early that hasn't already been hammered on zigs, it will be really, really good. Moving on to your actual hook baits, the options are kind of endless, very much like with bottom bait fishing. You can use just a straight piece of foam. I really do like to flavour that and add as much attraction into it as I can. I've got some here soaked up in the citrus. It could be that you want a really big hook bait, and I know people like Ollie have had great success fishing with enormous hook baits. They love a big old bit of foam over on the Horton complex in the spring. As I mentioned, I do like to use the screws. They just make hook bait mounting very, very easy. You've got the small screws here with a bit of foam on, and we've also brought out some larger screws for when you want to fish with bigger bits of foam or pop-ups. Or potentially, and this is the way I used to do it, you can fish a more traditional hair rig setup with 2 bits of foam. I often like to fish with black at the bottom and a brighter colour at the top. The thought process being there, if any fish are swimming above the zig and they're looking down, you've got a nice bright colour to draw their attraction. Or if they're underneath it, swimming around and they're potentially looking up, the black will silhouette the best off the grey or the light blue sky and stuff and make it easier for those fish to spot it and identify it. A little trick here, if you do want to incorporate maggots into it, it may well just look like a standard hair rig, but actually in here I've got a tiny little hook. It's a size 16 match hook, and what that allows me to do is pop it out of the foam, pop a couple of maggots on there, carefully bring it back round again. Haven't sadly got any maggots to show you, but I can pull that back inside. If you imagine now, there'll be a couple of maggots wriggling out of the top there. And again, it can just sort of stem a little bit of interest and attraction. I've just finished the rig off with a little bit of zig liner tube here. It just stops that hook link from bending back in on itself and closing the gate up too much. That's not actually required with the use of the zig screws because they've already got that liner built into place. There's a quick insight into zig fishing. Go and try it for yourself. Go somewhere nice and easy if you haven't caught one already. Once you've mastered the method, you'll be able to take it onto more trickier venues. And I have no doubt if the venue hasn't already been hammered on zigs right through the year, especially considering the fact that they're not always feeding on the bottom, you will be able to use it to your advantage and catch some really special fish. Moving on to floater fishing. I can't believe I'm sitting here now talking about floater fishing. As I said, it's a very white day out there at the moment. Everywhere's covered in snow, but hopefully guys, it won't be long before we can get back out there and do some floater rotor, get those fish up in the upper layers. For me, it's a fantastic method. I grew up doing it. I'm very, very passionate about it, and I find nothing more enjoyable than going for a full day's floater fishing. When I originally did this live stream, I did it in slightly different format in that I actually took the people that listened on a day's floater fishing with me. So I'm going to try and kind of redo that now. So let's pretend tomorrow we're going floater fishing. For me, this would mean an awful lot of excitement. This would mean butterflies in my tummy, like, oh, floater fishing, floater fishing. And the evening before, I would start to get things prepared. I'd get my rod sorted out, get my tackle sorted out, get my pack lunch sorted, make sure I've got some suntan lotion, probably throw a can of Red Bull in because a day's floater fishing can be really exhausting. And I would endeavour to try and get an early night because it's going to be full on, you know. If I'm going out for a day's floater fishing, I'm going to make the most of it. It's usually going to be in the summer months, so probably starting at 4 o'clock in the morning latest, and you'll be finishing at 10 o'clock at night. Now, when you're properly going for it, that is really exhausting. That night before, I'd start getting my bait prepared. For me, that will consist of the 11mm slicker floaters. I'll take a bucket, I'll pour some liquid in there. If you remember in one of the previous episodes, the bait episode, I showed you this liquid bait soak here. You've got very, very heavy liquid at the bottom and then the oil content at the top. I'd give that a really big shake around. If I stick a little bit in this jar, you'll see that the heavy liquids will fall down to the bottom. The oils and stuff will ping up to the surface. So it's putting attraction right through the upper layers. Put my floaters into a bucket, pour some of that on and give them a good glaze, get them all sticky and tacky and stuff, leave them maybe 10 minutes, and then I would dust over the top of those with some stick mix. And that makes them nice and coated. If I drop some again into this tank, you can see there's little bits falling off down through the water. If I regularly feed that, you've got lots of attraction falling down through the upper layers and stuff, hopefully pulling those fish up onto the surface. So I'd knock up at least a bucket of those, ready for my day's float fishing. I'd also knock up some of the riser pellets. Now when Kev showed this to me, probably somewhere between 8 and 10 years ago, it really did change my float fishing. Basically, riser pellets is a blend of 3 sizes. You've got some 1 mil, these tiny little ones here. You've got some 2 mil, and you've got some 4 mil. And there's approximately 10% of the 1 mil, 10% of the 2 mil, and then 80% of the 4 mil. Some of these sink, about 15 to 20% sink, the rest will float. So again, I'll stick a bag of riser pellets in a bucket, I'd glaze it all off with the liquid bait soak, and then dust it off again with the stick mix and stuff, just to make them super attractive. Again, I'll stick a few of them in there. And you can see the odd ones are falling down, and the rest stay on the surface and float. So that would be my bait preparation for the night before. I'd also make sure I knock up plenty of PVA bags. These have got the riser pellets inside. There are some situations where chucking a dot spot out in amongst those fish, it will spook them and stuff, and I can literally take these little bags, utilising catapults, depending on the range I want to go. I can feed those bags out there, they'll dissolve on the surface, and basically I can feed with making minimal disturbance and stuff. So my bait's all knocked up. I've decided to get an early night, but it probably will be quite difficult going to sleep because the excitement will just be too much, but the alarm will be set and I'll be aiming to get to that venue at least 15 minutes, 20 minutes before first light and stuff. Talking about this particular session, I'm going to use Chigborough Lakes as an example. It's a venue I've fished a lot over the years. It's got good floater fishing form. Basically, to give you guys an idea, if you're not aware of the venue, it's a mature complex of gravel pits. There's 4 pits on site. The largest lake is about 12 acres. The smallest is probably a couple of acres. It's got a good stock of fish, old fish. They're beautiful. It's quite shallow, so it's receptive to floater fishing. It warms up very, very quickly and stuff, and the fish love feeding in the upper layers there. So that's where I've decided to go for the day. I'd arrive at the venue, as I said, before first light, and I would use the barrow. Purely because I'm going to have quite a bit of gear with me, probably more so than you'd think for a day's floater fishing. So I'm going to use the Trax Power Barrow. I'm going to get that loaded up ready for a day's fishing. I've got my front pannier with bits in, probably going to have a set of waders with me, some carp care equipment, my unhooking mat and stuff, and I'm going to utilise these outriggers here, which are a fantastic product. They can be bolted to the side of your barrow and stuff. You can put a bucket of risers in one and a bucket of floaters in the other, and it means that I don't have to keep unloading the barrow and stuff to be able to get access to my bait. I'm going to have my unhooking mat with me, and I'm going to have a number of rods, probably a couple of landing nets because I'm feeling quite optimistic that it's going to be a good session. So I'd have 2 nets set up in such a way that, if you imagine the front of the barrows here, the poles sticking this way, the nets are coming down this way, and I can hold onto the net mesh and the barrow handles at the same time. So everything's set up and good to go. Rods wise, I'm definitely going to take with me a couple of fixed Zig Rig rods. As I said, it's quite shallow at Chigborough, and it's very, very weedy, so I may well need to discharge the lead on a take and stuff. So I'd have 2 fixed Zig Rig rods with me. They'd be rigged up with the lead clips, and then I'd take a little 12mm or 15mm Scopex squid pop up, and I'd just whittle that down to try and get it to look something like the 3 slicker floaters that I'm feeding. So not a bad kind of copy. I'd probably give that a good dip and a glug and stuff just to darken it up. So as well as the 2 fixed Zig Rig rods, I'd also take a couple of float rods, controller float rods. One would be for sort of long range fishing, and this would feature the bolt machine. This is the medium size. There is a smaller size and there's a larger size too. I haven't actually got any of these larger size ones here. But again, the setup is very similar to the Zig Rig fishing. I've got 10-pound Zig Flow on all the rods, little 4000 GT scope reels, the bolt machine, big long anti-tangle sleeve, because these light monos, they do want to wrap around on the cast and that massively minimises it. I've got 10-pound Zig Flow hook link, and then I've got a Zig screw there that I've actually screwed the pop-up into and stuff. Little size 12 floater core, and that'll just sit beautifully on the surface. So that's my long range sort of float rod. I'm hoping that over the course of the day, I'm going to be able to feed the fish closer in. I don't really want to fish at range if I can get away with it. As soon as I can get those fish feeding at 30 yards, 20 yards, 10 yards even, the better. So I'll also have set up another float rod, but this time it'll incorporate a real lightweight controller. Something like these little Drennan ones here are perfect. I've been using them for about 20 years now. They make very, very little disturbance on the water. And basically if the fish are at sort of short and medium range, but beyond free lining distance, that's when I'd use this kind of setup here. In both those instances, with the bolt machine or with these little controllers, I like to fish with quite a long hook link tail. So this is probably about 4 foot. 4 or 5 foot's about the sort of the length I'd use. This one here, I haven't got a Zig screw on. I've just mounted a size 12 floater claw directly to the main line. And in this instance, I take one of my favourite products ever. This is a soft hookable floater. So it's a pellet that's been pumped. I've also soaked them in some Scopex Squid liquid bait soak, and you can literally side hook with them. I can pop the hook in there, bend it round like so. And again, these really do replicate the kind of free offerings I'm putting out there. Why I like them so much over a pop-up, for example, is they quite quickly take on water and they sit very, very low in the surface film. If I drop this in the tank, hopefully you'll be able to see it. They don't sit proud of the water like a pop-up would or a bit of cork. What happens is when those fish start to feed, they'll swim around and they will go up to a hook bait and they will suck it down. You get the odd fish will sort of ride up over the top of it and take it, but the bulk of the fish, especially pressured fish, they will come up underneath a bait and using that suck and blow motion, they will suck that hook bait down into their mouth. If I'm fishing with a buoyant pop-up or a bit of cork, for example, cork's the worst one, man, and they come up to take that hook bait, let me take this. If they come up to that hook bait and they go to suck it down, but the buoyant pop-up won't go down and break the surface film, that's when you get a lot of eruptions and a lot of aborted takes. I need that to be almost critically balanced, which is why I love these soft hookable floaters so much, that with the weight of a hook, for example, they can literally go to those and just fly back into their mouth. So that's a big edge in my floater fishing. So we've got the barrow loaded, the outriggers are on, it's all good to go, the rods are set up, off I go. Kind of back to episode 2, location. Number one important thing is making sure I've got my Polaroid sunglasses, which we've discussed. I'm definitely going to need them. I'm going to look for vantage points, climbing trees potentially. I'm going to be looking at where's the sun going to be rising, which part of the water is going to be heated up first, what way's the wind blowing. I want to use the wind to my advantage. I basically want to drift this riser pellet and these slicker floaters out across the surface of the lake to cover the largest surface area as possible. And I'm going to watch that drift and I'm going to see where those fish start coming up and taking, and that's where I'll start to fish and stuff. I'm going to feed with the dot spod. It's probably worth noting that I do take a dot spod rod with me for my floater fishing. They're really easy to use. You can just literally fill these up, single-handed action, and then I can shut that down. So I'll get a few drifts of that out there. And yeah, I'll just watch it, I'll monitor the situation. I'm looking for fish coming up and starting to take those baits. The moment there's a little bit of interest out there, I will then get some rigs out. And the first thing I'll chuck out is the Zig rigs. It took me a long time to really get on this tactic of using Zig rigs in my floater fishing. For many, many years, I loved nothing more than sitting there with a controller float, a bolt machine, and watching the fish come up and take the hook bait and then striking. It was really, really exciting. It still is really, really exciting. But when you want to catch a lot of fish, it means you can only use one rod because you're concentrating so much on that hook bait. It's even difficult to use a catapult because every time you set the rod down to get the catapult to feed more, you probably know that you miss the take because you weren't holding the rod and stuff. With the Zig rig fishing, it means I can fish 2, 3, 4 rods out in the zone that those fish are taking floaters, but most importantly, I've got my hands free. I don't have to concentrate so hard. I can put all my concentration into feeding, making sure there's a good drift of bait out there, making sure I've not overfed, making sure the fish aren't drifting off out of my zone in the lake and stuff. By fishing with the over depth zigs, it just frees my hands up and my brain to concentrate on the situation. To fish with the over depth zigs, what I'll do is try and ascertain how deep the area is. So maybe I'll have a couple of casts of a bare lead, count it down, 1, 2, 3, oh yeah, that's about 1.5 meters. Potentially I might make a cast with a marker float, but more often than not I try and avoid this because it will just spook the fish. Anyway, I'll over tie the length of the Zig Rig. And then what I'll do is I'll take a very big, buoyant, bright pop-up, and I'll pop it onto the Zig Rig itself like so pulling it straight in like that. I'll then cast it out into the zone that I'm going to be fishing them, and what I'm looking for is that big bright pop-up on the surface. Okay, great, brilliant. It's laying on the surface now. I don't know how much, but it's laying on the surface. I'll then retrieve it in and I'll reduce the length of the fixed Zig Rig by maybe 4 or 5 inches, shorten it down, cast back out exactly into the zone again, and out it goes on the surface. Yep, it's still out there, it's still popping up. Bring it back in again, reduce the length of the fixed Zig Rig a little bit more, cast it out again. Yep, it's still out on the surface. And I'll keep shortening that hook link down until that pop-up just disappears. I'll then scrap the hook link or save it if I do decide to fish one just underneath the surface. I'll retie my zigs for the day, or get them out of my nice little zig pouch that are already prepared, and basically get them to the exact length I want. When I'm fishing over depth zigs on the surface, I'm looking for about 6 to 8, maximum 10 centimetres of mono laying on the surface of the water like this. I don't want loads of mono laying on the surface. This is where you get aborted takes. And I also think if you come up too short and it's only just laying on the surface, you also get aborted takes. I've found over the years the optimum length is sort of 6 to 10 centimetres of mono laying on the surface. That's how you get the most positive takes. So the fixed Zig Rigs, they'll be banged out there. I'll carry on regulating the feed and I'll just monitor the situation. What I'm trying to do over the course of that session is, let's say for example I start off and those fish are feeding confidently at 80 yards. My number one aim is to bring those fish closer and closer to me over the course of the day, and it can be done. The real aim of the game is to get those fish feeding underneath my feet. If it dries up and starts to get slower, or if I lose the fish and they drift off in different directions, that's when the bulk machine rods will come out. If they're coming in a little bit closer, that's when the controller float rods will be coming out. And certainly in the middle part of the day, let's say 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock, you know, when the sun's now up and burning brightly, it may well be the trickiest time for us. And that might be when I'll reel everything in, I'll go for a wander with the bulk machine rod and just try and be a bit more opportunist about it and nick those extra bonus fish, so to speak. It may well be that the day's gone really well. I might stay put and carry on working the swim, bringing those fish closer and closer. But I say again, my number one aim is to work those fish so close that eventually I've got them feeding down here by my feet. What that then allows me to do is to simply use the sawn off rod and take a soft hookable floater. I've literally just mounted a size 12 floater claw on there, and I can take one of these soft hookable floaters, side hook it, like so. Now I can start being selective. You know, I've had a load of doubles today. Maybe my best fish is a mid-20, and I will just wait and watch, looking for those bigger carp, you know. It's a great tactic that allows you to single out a specific fish. There might be a big fully or a beautiful linear you really want to catch. There might be a koi, it might be just the biggest one. And I will just sit tight, waiting and watching, carry on feeding, but I'm looking for the big set of mouths or the big set of shoulders or just that big dark shape. And then with the sawn off, I can just underarm or a little light flick, making absolutely no disturbance whatsoever, and I can start picking off those fish I really want to catch. It is tiring, guys. It is hard work. You need to be organised. You need to be prepared. If I go and do this for a day, I will do it at 100%. If I think to myself, oh, I want another go tomorrow, and I go back tomorrow, I won't be firing at 100%. It'll be like 70% effectiveness, because it's just draining and tiring, you know. You've been out in hot conditions, you've probably moved a number of times, you've concentrated an awful lot on what you're doing. This isn't a day for sitting there drinking beer and watching Netflix and stuff, chilling out. This is a full-on fishing day. So the second day I might go at 70%. If I really wanted to go for a third day, truth is, I'll be wasting my time because I'll be very ineffective. I wouldn't have the get up and go, I wouldn't be motivated, I probably wouldn't be there at first light, I'd be tired, I'd be just done in basically, because it is so intense and stuff. So if I wanted to do it again, I'd probably go home, go back to work, go back to normality, chill out and get myself fired up for another day and stuff. One of the biggest problems you'll probably have presented to you on a day's floater fishing is bird life. They can be an absolute nuisance. Ducks, geese, swans, they're a right pain, but they can be fed off. More often than not, you can keep applying food. Eventually, they'll leave you in peace. Is there a way around it? Not really. You know, the last thing you want to be doing is hooking waterfowl, so you know, you've got to be very, very careful there. A bigger problem is the seagulls. Certainly nowadays, I don't really remember this issue when I was younger, but nowadays they can be a real pain. The only kind of advice I can give you is use a nice bright braid, something yellow, then potentially you can put the dot spot out there and leave it floating on the surface. That can kind of keep them at bay for a period. You can continue trying to overfeed and stuff to try and compensate for it, but a lot of the time those gulls crashing on the surface of the water, they will spook the carp. The biggest thing going for you on a day's floater fishing is other people are also floater fishing, and I always pray when I get there that there's other people with the same mindset as me, and hopefully I won't be the only one getting bombarded by gulls and stuff all day, but they are a problem. There's not a great deal you can do about it. Yeah, it is exciting. I can't wait for it myself. We've got a couple more months now until the weather gets really good, but I can't wait to get out there. It's best done with friends because it is so active, because sometimes you can have multiple fish in the net, you can work as a team, and you know, as we say here at Nash, go and have a day's floater rotor fishing together. Right, to finish up, last topic, and it's definitely my favourite of all, that is stalking. I'm talking about here where I go out with basically just a rod with my unhooking mat, potentially with a little bag, and I go off hunting. For me, this is my happy place. I love fishing. We've discussed it a lot over these episodes and stuff, but the fishing I like least is when I'm sitting behind static rods, when I'm not sure what's going on out there. Have I fed too much? Have I not fed enough? Is there even any fish in front of me? I can't see them. But with stalking, oh man, I love it. I feel in control. I don't feel there's any burden. I can go on an adventure. I can explore. I can target and single out particular individual fish I might want to catch. And there's just nothing more exciting. If you look at this image here, I love this shot that Ollie's took. It's of a single carp sitting in its weedy environment, chilling. It's not got a care in the world, and along comes me. For me, this is the pinnacle of angling. You approach that fish very, very quietly and stealthily, knowing that one wrong footstep, you know, too much noise, one sudden thump or bang, you'll spook that fish. You then get your rod, you get your bait, you get your rig, all sorted, and you're shaking. You know, I am literally shaking at this point. I've been doing it for years and I still get the same buzz every time I find myself in this situation. You're shaking. You know that when you make the cast, if you mess it up, you've blown your chance. That fish will just drift off, ghost off, disappear. So you know that cast is so critical, you know. You'll make the cast, you'll retrieve it potentially back into the zone of that fish, and whether it be a floating hook bait, something slow sinking, or potentially just down on the bottom in the vicinity of where that fish is, the hook bait will stem some interest. And the fish's pecks will go out, its dorsal might flick up, its gills might go a little bit faster and stuff, and it will start verging closer and closer to that hook bait. At this point, my heart's racing, man, faster and faster and faster and faster. And the moment it sucks that hook bait in, it's down to me now. It's not the heavy lead coming into play. It's not how sharp my hook is. It's not my bite alarm. It's me and the fish. And it's all down to my timing. If I strike too soon, I can ruin the chance. If I strike too late, the fish could have already spat the bait out. So it's critical that I strike at the right moment. You strike, you set the hook, the rod hoops over, the water erupts. For me, there is nothing more special in angling than that moment, and that's why I do it so much and love it so much. I often think to myself, this is a bit of a morbid thought, but we're all going to die one day. You know, that's the only certainty really in life, that one day, sadly, we are all going to die. And I would love nothing more to die in this situation where I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s or whatever. I'm still out there hunting and stalking and stuff, and basically the adrenaline and the excitement of being in that moment of watching a fish take the hook bait and me getting everything right and striking at the right time. If I could have one wish, I wouldn't die of old age, I wouldn't die of cancer, I wouldn't die of coronavirus or getting hit by a bus. I'd die of a heart attack because it all just got too much, man. And I'd love to be found just laying in the long grass somewhere, still clutching onto my sawn off rod, That would be a pretty cool way to go. But anyway, that's really morbid. We're supposed to be talking about exciting stalking and stuff. So, when do you go stalking? Well, I'll go as much as I possibly can. It's my preferred tactic, primarily because I can see the fish, it gives me the most excitement, and there's no doubt there. Basically, if I'm stalking a carp and the carp disappears, I don't just carry on sitting there stalking or standing there stalking. I move on to look for the next opportunity. So I try and do it wherever possible. Clarity is important. Being able to see the fish is essential. You can do it all through the year. Spring, summer, fantastic months for it. The autumn, still good. And even in the winter, if the venue's nice and clear, why can't you stalk right through the year? And I've had some fantastic sessions right in the depths of winter on nice clear venues where I can see those fish and still stalk them and stuff. The best time of the day, more often than not, is the morning, because the fish, I feel, have a little slumber period through the night. They wake up, they're a little bit more naive in the morning and stuff. I've always had my best success first thing in the morning. The middle of the day can be very good when they're not feeding and it's pointless sitting behind static rods. That's when I will go stalking anyway, so you catch some extra fish doing it in the middle of the day. And of course, going into that witching hour in the evening and stuff can also be really productive when the fish come on the feed that little bit better and stuff. It's not to be written off during the night. I've had some mega sessions in the hours of darkness, total darkness, stalking fish. A couple of examples here. We had an amazing trip to Warsaw, Pavel, Carlo, Ollie and I, and basically I went stalking all night. Complete darkness and stuff, stalking with bread on the surface. I've got another shot here of out in Serbia, you know, where I was fishing a park lake and managed to stalk them off the surface during the hours of darkness and stuff. Yeah, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge in that you can't often see exactly what's going on, but in those situations I fish with a rod very, very high, have my finger on the line and stuff so I can feel the pluck and stuff, and most importantly I'm listening for that slurping sound of them taking the hook bait down. So it can be done all year, it can be done on rivers, lakes, canals. I've even caught them on tidal rivers and stuff. Basically, if you can see those fish, it means you've got the opportunity to try and stalk them. You need to be quiet, you need to be stealthy, gentle footfall, checking every little nook and cranny, and basically just go hunting, go exploring. What do I use? Well, not a lot. That's the other great thing about it. You don't need a huge amount of equipment. And I think of all the products I've got from Nash Tackle, this is definitely my favourite. This is the utility skim. Inside here, I've got a net, and not just any net. This is a massive 42-inch carp net. It's a two-part design, so you've got arms that are joined together. So I pop the two bits like that. So I've now created a normal length landing net arm. You've then got a two-part pole. This is a scope Black Ops net. I can screw that together like a snooker cue almost. And then I've got an adjustable section up the top here that allows me to make it really, really long if necessary. And then on the end of that, I've got a metal block and I can just pop the arms of the net in there. So just out of that tiny little skim, I've actually got a very, very normal large landing net like so. So that all fits in there. As well as the net, I've got my rod. It's a sawn-off. You've probably heard about me talking about these a lot. They're available in 3 different test curves. £1, which I do use. I love it for smaller carp and stuff. The girls use the £1 dwarf version for their fishing. Then you've got a £2. Again, it's available in scope and dwarf, which I probably use more than anything. It's got a little bit more flex in the carbon, and when you're fishing with these light hook links and thin lines, I can just compress the blank a little bit more and cast those free line hook baits that little bit further. And there is a £3 version, which I do use in real snaggy and weedy situation. You've got the retractable butt there. That's paired up with a little scope GT 4000 reel, £10 Zig flow, but I also take with me an additional spool, and this has got sort of £20 mono on it. Bullet mono for fishing in sort of lily pads, snags, weeds and stuff. So I will flip between the two lines depending on the situation. What's really important is you lip fill the reel. I don't want, you know, that half filled or 3/4 filled. I need that filled right up to the lip because that will give me the additional distance required. So as well as the rod, as well as the net, you'll notice there's a number of pouches on the outside there. In this main compartment here, I've also got a bait box. That'll always have some maggots inside, which is kind of my number one sort of stalking hook bait. And then the other pouches, I've got some hooks and stuff, some bread bombs, some little ledger stops, all in there. Moving along to the next pouch, I've got some floats, some controllers, some split shot, scissors, and then this little pouch up at the end, I've got some spare sunglasses. These Polaroids never come out of here. I'll always take another set with me, but if I do stand on them, if I do lose them, they're so essential that I always make sure I've got a spare set with me. The utility skin does come with a shoulder strap, which is great when I'm traveling to the venue. But once I get there, and this is now empty, what I can do with it is detach the shoulder strap, store that away in one of the little pouches, and it allows me to actually wrap this around my waist, in effect a giant bum bag, so I can access all these various compartments. This has got a wipe clean inner, so I could throw a load of floaters, for example, in the centre of that. It's got a little elastic loop so I can store my catapult in there. It just means, most importantly, my hands are free to hold that rod and net and go stalking. Other equipment I'll definitely take with me is this little baiting pouch here. That'll be filled up with riser pellets and floaters and stuff. If it's the summer months, that can go around my waist. Again, meaning I've got access there to feed and stuff quite quickly. And if I'm going for a full day stalking, I'll also take this little stash pack with me. It's a little rucksack with a couple of compartments. It's got one main carcass here that I could throw, for example, 5 or 6 big loaves of bread in, maybe fill it up with riser pellets, plenty of water and drink and stuff, and that can go on my back. If I'm going for a shorter session, I can also transform this into a little side security pouch by basically unzipping that front compartment there. I can then roll down all the straps like this, re-zip it back up, and basically transform a rucksack into a little side bag like this. Again, storing things like my phone and my wallet and stuff inside. So a really useful item for when I'm out stalking. If I flip it back round again, you've got some straps on the bottom. You've got some buckles and clips on the bottom, and these are to attach my unhooking mat. Depending on the situation, I may choose to use the mat in this format. There's 2 scope mats in the range, flat mats. They can either be carried like this, they come supplied with a shoulder strap, like so, or you can actually roll them up really, really compact. So that's the exact same mat there, but now rolled up. On the bottom of the stash pack, you've got buckles with corresponding clips, and I can clip these on here and basically attach my unhooking mat like so, meaning that I can travel around without it over my shoulder, just strapped onto the bottom of my rucksack. That's kind of the main sort of gear I take with me. Talking specifically about the rigs itself, well, it couldn't be any simpler, guys. I literally just freeline. My number one tactic would be maggots. I haven't got any here to show you, sadly, which is a shame, but to give you an idea, I literally take my 10-pound Zig Flow line and I'll attach onto the end of that a size 12, size 8, size 10 floater claw hook, sometimes even a size 6. The size of the hook will dictate how far I can cast and how many maggots I can put on there and stuff. Sometimes the fish want a really small hook bait, just 5 or 6 maggots. Sometimes you can get away with a real big ball. In fact, it can stem even more interest. What I want to do is, I want to kind of critically balance the maggots. I don't want them to fall too fast down through the water. So what I do is I take some lengths of cylindrical foam, this little hook bait foam here, taking a pair of scissors, I just cut the foam into roughly a maggot shape. It really doesn't matter exactly what they look like. And then I'll put, for example, 3 or 4 real maggots on, then potentially a bit of foam, then 2 or 3 more real maggots, then maybe another little bit of foam, something like that. The maggots will all be wriggling, and as that goes down through the water, it will flick and twist like this. It's really, really enticing and attractive. And I want that hook bait to go down through the water really, really slowly like this. What I'm looking for is, of course, carp. And I'm not really looking for carp that are laying up in the lilies or sitting still. I'm looking for fish that are moving and traveling. I don't really want the fish swimming towards me like this. I don't really want the fish swimming away from me like this. I want to be on the bank here like this and the fish to be coming across me like so, from left to right or from right to left. What I'll do is I will overcast, if the fish is swimming in this direction, I'll overcast the ball of maggots, I'll retrieve it back like this, so it's on the same line as the fish, and I'm basically trying to time that ball of maggots falling down through the water to coincide with the fish's mouth, something like this. 9 times out of 10, guys, I promise you this, 9 times out of 10, if you discreetly get that ball of maggots out there and you retrieve it back to the line the fish is swimming on, and you get that ball of maggots to fall in front of them, guess what they do? they suck it in their mouth. They can't help it. They were just going about their business, having a lovely time, and all of a sudden now they've got this wriggling ball of maggots in front of them. In it goes. I often liken it to a kind of game, you know, and I play this game all day long and I love it so much. And it's kind of quite similar to, if you go to the arcades, you know the claw grabbing machines where they got teddy bears in there. It's £1 for 3 goes, you're with your missus or your wife, she's desperate for the Winnie the Pooh one, she makes you stick 20 quid in there and you still walk away with nothing. It's very much like that game, except it's a lot more successful. And with that, you kind of got 2 options. You go forward with the arrow and then you go right with the arrow, and then it drops down. And that's kind of what I'm playing that game constantly with my stalking. I'm looking for an opportunity, looking for a fish swimming in a particular direction, and I'm just coinciding that bait falling perfectly in front of it to take the hook bait. The reason I don't want them swimming away from me like this and overcasting like that is because the shape of the carp and stuff, I can't actually see if it's taken the hook bait in its mouth or not. And I don't really want them swimming towards me like this with the hook bait falling down here, because, and it's happened to me a number of times, doesn't matter how much you strike to the left or the right, more often than not you pull the hook bait straight back out of their mouths. It's much, much better when those fish are coming across you, left to right or right to left. Another great tactic is the bread bomb. Again, you'll have heard me talk about this many times before, I'm sure. Really, really simple product to use. It's a latex band, it's available in 2 sizes. This is the small size. To be fair, I only really use the small size. You can thread that onto your Zig Flow line, attach a hook. I normally use a size 5 or a size 4 claw hook. And then you've got this latex band on there that's really, really easy to use. And then you can simply take a piece of bread, and you can whack that inside. And not just bread, I've caught fish on croissants, pan au chocolats. I remember being in Vienna once in Austria, fishing with bits of wafer stuffed inside there. You can literally take a bit of bread, as big or as small as you like, whack that inside, and there you have it. Really, really simple to use. There are times when I don't use one. If I'm going to get a quick bite, for example, or the fish are incredibly spooky, I'll try and mask that hook bait a little bit more. But the bulk of the time I am using a bread bomb, because the big purpose it serves is it allows me to fish with bread on the hook for much, much longer. It will stay out there floating, the band contracts around the bread swells outwards, and yeah, I can even retrieve that back in and maybe get 1, 2, even 3 casts with that same bit of bread inside the bread bomb. I'll also fish it slow sinking, so I'll just literally squeeze the bread a little bit just to get it to slowly sink down through the water. Can be a very, very devastating tactic if those fish are spooky on the top, but yeah, that'll just sit lovely on the surface, and that'll sit out there for 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes even if there's little rudd pecking at it and stuff. Because of that bread bomb contracting around the bread, you're always left with a hook bait out there fishing. If the fish are really, really spooky, as I just mentioned, one little tactic I do sometimes use is taking good old-fashioned Tipp-Ex and just whitening the hook up, just so it doesn't look so blatant underneath. But yeah, it's caught me a lot of fish. I'm yet to find carp anywhere as far away as China, New Zealand, that don't love a decent bit of bread. You know, carp do love to eat it. Worms, another good one. Again, sadly I haven't got any to show you now, but they've caught me a lot of fish by going around stalking and stuff, especially on venues where they're very, very natural carp. You know, they're not used to seeing fishermen's bait and stuff. And of course, as we've touched on a minute ago, just going around stalking them with a soft hookable floater. So a very, very similar tactic. Just take the hook and you can literally take these soft hookable floaters, fish one. This is quite a big hook, it's a size 6 claw, so I'll whack 2 on there. And I can just go around stalking with them like that. So there's 3 kind of hook bait options, but the thing to remember is I haven't got a float, I haven't got a lead, I haven't got anything there. All I'm doing is freelining my hook bait. It makes no disturbance on impact of the water, and yeah, I can just go around hunting those fish. It's not just a small fish tactic. I've been really lucky to catch fish in England to well over £50, 55 pounds in fact, by fishing with this exact method, £2 sawn off, £10 Zig Flow, little hooks, and just going around stalking fish. It brings me the most excitement. It can be done all year. It just takes, I think the hardest thing with stalking is energy, having the motivation to stay on your toes, keep searching, keep looking, keep hunting those fish down, but the rewards really are there to have. In many instances, by going with just a single rod and a lot of motivation and energy, more often than not, you'll catch more fish than those people sitting behind 2, 3, 4 rods in just one swim. There's a quick insight into fishing in the upper layers, guys. That is the end of episode 8. I've just got one more episode to go next time, and we're going to be talking about who is the greatest. Can you be the greatest? Can you complete fishing? Or more importantly, can we all improve in our angling? I know I personally can. There's lots of areas I can get so much better at, and that really excites me. Tune in for episode number 9. Until then, guys, I hope you get out to do a little bit of fishing yourself. Best wishes, be safe, big ups.